Bienvenidos todos y todas y todes. Bienvenue tout le monde. Welcome everyone to this Action Coalition dialogue session on bodily autonomy and sexual and reproductive health and rights. Bienvenidos. My name is Tamil Kendall, and I am the Action Coalition Technical Lead, and it's going to be my great pleasure to co-moderate and guide this session this evening for some of us and for others this morning. So welcome everyone. It's absolutely a delight to be here. During the session, what will happen is we are going to have a bit of scene setting and then a conversation with the leaders of the Action Coalition and some very special guests about the content of the draft blueprint. And then we'll have a short question and answer section and then learn more about where the Action Coalitions are going from here. Now I would like to give a very brief overview of the technical functions in this Zoom webinar. So you'll see that translation is available. You click on the icon, the globe icon, at the bottom of the window to select your language of choice. And you can use the Q&A to submit any questions to the speakers. And now, without any further ado, I would like to turn it over to my colleague, Sarah Hendricks, the Director of the Policy Program and Intergovernmental Division of UN Women, and an Action Coalition co-lead, to give the official welcome and to share a bit about this exciting Action Coalition journey that we've been on.
Thank you so much, Tamil, and it is absolutely great to be here together with all of you. A really warm welcome wherever you are joining from across the world to today's evening/morning session on bodily autonomy and sexual and reproductive health and rights. I'd like to thank all of you for really getting to this important milestone in our Action Coalition journey, the Mexico City Forum, which represents our kickoff of the Action Coalition blueprints themselves. And it's my pleasure right now to be able to share a little bit, for us to wind back into history and talk a little bit about how the Action Coalitions have come to be, what the journey has been to date, and where we're heading as we move forward. So just to recall that the Action Coalitions have been launched following a very clear and focused fact. Essentially, that 26 years after the Beijing Platform for Action, not a single country has achieved gender equality. And there is a pressing need to go from words to real, funded, and game-changing concrete action. 26 years after women from all over the world gathered in Beijing and promises for gender equality were made, we absolutely know that much more is needed, especially when it comes to women's sexual and reproductive health and rights. And I think this fact is become all the more urgent in this past year of 2020, as COVID-19 has exacerbated inequalities, where we've seen the deepening of poverty for women and for girls, with predictions for women's economic as well as health lives being particularly impacted. I think the Action Coalitions are entering this moment in time during the COVID-19 pandemic, where this platform as a global, multi-stakeholder and innovative platform really stands poised to build a more equal, a more inclusive, and a more sustainable world, with gender equality and rights at its heart, and as the engine for building back differently, and for building back equal. So this ambition of the Action Coalitions, I think, is materialized in the dynamism of its journey. And you can see that dynamism in the slide that's in front of you. This journey that started almost 2 years ago with the decisions made by the governments of Mexico, of France, UN Women, and with partners across women's rights organizations and civil society, and with youth to mark the anniversary of Beijing by the launch of a focused, action-driven effort. The Generation Equality Action Coalitions then came to start to mobilize efforts across actors together to identify themes. And you can see that in the visual itself. 6 themes were identified early in 2020, following several consultations, evidence-based analysis, and significant dialogue, and really building on that to ensure that these themes are reflective of the core priorities in women and girls' lives. And bodily autonomy and sexual and reproductive health and rights was identified as a critical theme to accelerate action in this UN decade of action. Then our journey led us to identify and build essentially a leadership structure. A successful call for interest was launched early in 2020, and 2,000 or more letters of interest were submitted, which led to over 95 leaders joining the leadership structure across these 6 Action Coalition themes. And these leaders have been coming together to mobilize governments, women's, feminist, and youth-led organizations, international organizations, as well as the private sector and philanthropy to do a few important things: to catalyze collective action, to spark global and local conversations, and to drive increased public and private investment so that we can collectively deliver concrete progress, in this case on sexual and reproductive health and rights. These leaders have been working together over the past many, many months through design sprints, through Action Coalition workshops in 2021, as well as during the fall of 2020, to build a draft blueprint, to identify bold and transformative actions that are being presented to you today. And each blueprint articulates a very clear and ambitious agenda that will indeed seek to accelerate, to turbocharge concrete change in this UN decade of action. The blueprints will ensure especially that, that there is an opportunity for intersectionality, for transformative feminist leadership to be concretized as a core part of this process itself. And so with that, that is our journey to date. It brings us here to the Mexico City kickoff, where we will not only share the draft blueprint, but also speak about the opportunity to engage, to become commitment makers. So I'll turn back over to you, Tamil, to take us onwards in our journey, and to thank everybody for today's conversation and for the daily involvement that you have given to this extraordinary effort. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So now it gives me great pleasure to share with you the vision, the draft vision that the Action Coalition has developed in the area of bodily autonomy and SRHR. And that is that women and girls in all of their diversity are empowered to exercise their sexual and reproductive health and rights, and that they can really make autonomous decisions about their bodies, free from any type of coercion, violence, or discrimination. And to further enable that those choices are real, that information, education, and services are freely available, accessible, acceptable, and of high quality so that they meet human rights standards. And to do this, we know that we need civil society organizations, feminist organizations, Indigenous organizations, girl-led organizations to be strengthened alongside their allies. And also for more governments and indeed all stakeholders, all parties to strengthen and protect and promote sexual and reproductive health and rights. Our vision is that we'll work across action coalitions with multiple stakeholders to transform gender and social norms, promote gender equality, and in doing this, we'll apply an intersectional, intercultural, human rights-based approach that will leave no one behind. So now I'd like to ask you to answer this poll. Could we have the poll questions, please, about which part of this vision resonates most with you? Which part of this vision gives you the most hope? Is it about empowerment? Is it about being free from coercion, discrimination, and violence? Or is it about having the high quality information, education, and services that are needed to exercise sexual and reproductive health and rights? Or is what really excites you working together? So I'll just give a few moments for you to think about that and to answer this poll on the vision statement. Okay, let's see those results. So there's both a very strong push for freedom from coercion, discrimination, and violence, which of course resonates with the Beijing Platform for Action and the commitments to women's sexual rights, as well as their reproductive rights, and for the information, education, and services to enable that. Thank you. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Because the next slide, what it really shows us is that we have a very, very long way to go in order to turn this vision into reality for women and girls in all of their diversity around the world. Currently, less than half of girls and women half of girls and women say that they can make these decisions for themselves. And this is even more striking when you consider that 55% are those who say that they can make decisions about contraception, about whether or not to have sex, and about seeking healthcare, either on their own or in collaboration with their partner. So these 45% of girls and women who say that they cannot exercise bodily autonomy in this way feel that they have no capacity to make decisions about their own sexual and reproductive lives. So we have work to do. And if we take an intersectional lens and we look at how maternal mortality rates are so much higher in those states that are affected by humanitarian crisis or where the state is fragile, that's 60% of the deaths. Or we look at the situations of the girls and young women who are living in the poorest households and don't have the information, education, and services or the support to not become mothers at a young age. So when compared to young women who are in the richest households. So we certainly have much to do. And this action coalition proposes some concrete ways that we can move forward together to make that vision into a reality. So I would like now to invite a comment from the Honorable Minister Flemming Møller Mortensen, who is the Minister of International Cooperation of Denmark, who is going to give us an overview of those concrete game-changing goals.
Denmark is proud to be part of this coalition of women and youth-led organizations, international organizations, governments, and the private sector. Together, we have identified the most urgent gaps and game-changing tactics to accelerate action for women and girls' sexual and reproductive health and rights by 2026. First, all stakeholders must increase delivery of comprehensive sexuality education in schools and outside schools. We aim to reach 50 million more children and adolescents. Second, we want to increase the quality of and access to comprehensive services for 50 million more adolescent girls and women. And we want to support the removal of restrictive policies and legal barriers to ensure that 50 million more adolescent girls and women live in areas where they can access safe and legal abortion. Third, we want to act for the 45% of adolescent girls and women who cannot make their own decisions about having sex, contraception, or healthcare. We must enact legal and policy change, transform gender and social norms, and increase knowledge of rights so that 260 million more girls, adolescents, and women are empowered to make decisions about their bodies, sexuality, and reproduction. We want to end harmful practices like FGM, child marriage, and unions. We want to make our vision a reality. So we must ensure accountability and increase participation and financial support to organizations working for sexual and reproductive health and rights. Denmark is fully behind the identified priorities of the Action Coalition. We firmly believe that a woman and girl's right to decide over their body is a fundamental human right. We must take all possible measures to ensure that women and girls in all their diversity can make informed choices throughout their life. They have the right to decide when, if, with whom, and how many children they want. We have work to do, so let's start it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Møller Mortensen, for sharing with us the how of the what of the vision of the Action Coalitions. Now we're going to discuss a bit about the how. And to do this, I would like to invite one of the youth leaders of the Action Coalition, Adriana González, who is a member of the Youth and Child Political Commission of the Enlace Continental de las Mujeres Indígenas de las Américas, ECMIA. Please, Adriana, we look forward to hear from you about the principles that will guide the work, this important work of the Action Coalition on Bodily Autonomy and Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights.
Buenas noches a todos y todos. Es un gusto estar aquí con ustedes y como ya mencionó Tamil, yo soy parte del comité político de la Comisión de Niñez y Juventud del Enlace Continental de Mujeres Indígenas de las Américas. Y voy a hablarles un poco acerca de los conceptos clave que son transversales a todas las acciones y las tácticas de la coalición de acción, autonomía sobre el cuerpo y derechos sexuales y reproductivos. Y quiero empezar como compartiéndoles que el derecho a la salud, fundado en el Pacto sobre Derechos Económicos, Sociales y Culturales, incluye 4 componentes referidos al marco de disponibilidad, accesibilidad, aceptabilidad y calidad. ¿Y qué queremos decir con esto? Bueno, la disponibilidad nos referimos a la cantidad suficiente de instalaciones, de bienes, de servicios y programas de salud pública y atención de la salud para todas las personas. Estas dimensiones importantes de disponibilidad pueden medirse con datos agregados, por ejemplo, por edad, por sexo, por ubicación geográfica, situación socioeconómica, origen étnico, La accesibilidad se refiere a las 4 dimensiones superpuestas de la no discriminación: accesibilidad física, accesibilidad económica y accesibilidad de la información. Luego tenemos la accesibilidad, que es el respeto de la ética médica, culturalmente apropiados y con sensibilidad o perspectiva de género. Esto quiere decir que todas las instalaciones, los bienes, los servicios y los programas se deben centrar en las personas y deben atender nuestras necesidades específicas como poblaciones diversas, desde nuestras diversidades y realidades. La calidad. Esta debe ser científica y médicamente aprobada. Deben tener experiencia y percepción de calidad. Y dentro de todo esto tenemos 4 conceptos que son necesarios, ¿no? Bueno, 3 conceptos más que son necesarios. El primero fue el derecho a la salud, el segundo es la interseccionalidad. Un enfoque interseccional va a abordar la intersección entre las desigualdades de género y otras desigualdades, así como formas de opresión. Esto quiere decir que el uso de este enfoque implica atender las necesidades integrales de la diversidad de mujeres y niñas sin ninguna forma de discriminación, incluidas las asociadas a la sexualidad, a la identidad o expresión de género, la edad, la condición de discapacidad, el origen étnico, el estado civil, la situación económica, entre otras. Un enfoque interseccional sobre la autonomía, sobre el cuerpo y la salud y los derechos sexuales y reproductivos va a trascender la idea de múltiples formas de discriminación u opresión, porque vamos a insistir en que dichas opresiones no pueden considerarse en un marco aditivo, sino que las experiencias de desigualdad de las mujeres deben contextualizarse dentro de una noción de desigualdades simultáneas e interrelacionadas. Tenemos también el tercer concepto, que es el enfoque intercultural o la interculturalidad. La Declaración de las Naciones Unidas sobre los Derechos de los Pueblos Indígenas protege el derecho de estos pueblos a disfrutar del nivel más alto posible de salud física y mental, a acceder a las medicinas tradicionales y respetarlas y reconocerlas, y a mantener sus prácticas de salud y a determinar de manera activa de qué forma se diseñan y prestan dichos servicios. Entonces, un enfoque intercultural reconoce la diferencia entre grupos étnicos de los países, entre los países y en el interior de estos, y promueven una inclusión de la sabiduría ancestral y espiritual y las prácticas de salud asociadas a los sistemas sanitarios. Entonces, las políticas públicas y los sistemas de salud interculturales se diseñan, se implementan y se supervisan con la plena participación de los pueblos y comunidades indígenas, de tal manera que promovemos el derecho humano al consentimiento previo, libre e informado. Los enfoques culturales y sobre migración también convierten a los enfoques interculturales sobre salud en enfoques mundialmente pertinentes. Y aquí hay algo muy importante que debemos mencionar, y es que los usos y costumbres de los pueblos y comunidades indígenas no justifican las violencias ejercidas contra las niñas, adolescencias, juventudes y mujeres indígenas. Entonces, un enfoque intercultural y la interculturalidad no admiten discursos ni prácticas que buscan negar a la niñez y a las mujeres la autonomía sobre su cuerpo, ni sobre su salud, ni sobre sus derechos sexuales y reproductivos, ni ningún otro derecho en nombre de la cultura o de la tradición. Por último, tenemos el concepto de no dejar a nadie atrás. En el 2015, cuando se adoptaron los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible, la Asamblea General de las Naciones Unidas resolvió que nadie se debe quedar atrás. Se reconoce que la dignidad de la persona humana es fundamental, por lo que se desea ver cumplidos los ODS y las metas para todas las naciones y los pueblos, y para todos los sectores de la sociedad, y que se esforzarán para llegar primero a los rezagados o vulnerados. En el área de la salud, en un sentido amplio y específicamente en el área de la salud sexual y reproductiva, sabemos que el lugar de una persona rural frente a urbano, o bien si vive en un escenario de crisis humanitario, la situación socioeconómica y el origen étnico y la raza afectan adversamente el acceso a la atención y los servicios de salud, servicios básicos, ¿no? La evidencia disponible indica que estas desigualdades y disparidades en el acceso a la salud y en los resultados se vieron exacerbados por la pandemia de COVID-19. Y en el plano internacional, una brecha considerable de datos sobre la salud sexual y reproductiva de las personas cuya identidad de género no es normativa, decir que no somos binaria o cisgénero, o que tienen diversas orientaciones sexuales. No obstante, los datos disponibles indican que estas personas y grupos enfrentan discriminación, barreras a la atención y los derechos de salud y derechos sexuales y reproductivos y peores resultados. Por último, en todas las coaliciones para la acción se da prioridad a la promoción de los derechos de las adolescencias, con edades comprendidas entre 10 y 19 años, y la contribución a la agenda sobre mujeres, paz y seguridad, y la mejora de la vida de las niñas y mujeres que viven en escenarios de crisis humanitaria. Entonces, tenemos estos 4 conceptos clave, que es el derecho a la salud, la interseccionalidad, la interculturalidad y no dejar a nadie atrás. Creo que también quisiera mencionar que la salud sexual y reproductiva es un estado de bienestar físico, emocional, mental y social en relación con todos los aspectos de la sexualidad, la reproducción, aunque no solo de esta, y no simplemente la ausencia de enfermedad, disfunción o dolencias. Es todo. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, Adriana, for sharing those very important principles that will guide each of those 4 actions that were mentioned by the minister: comprehensive sexuality education, comprehensive abortion and contraception services, increasing SRHR decision-making and bodily autonomy for girls and women in all of their diversity, and also strengthening civil society. And so to provide a bit more detail and insight into the first action, I would like to ask my esteemed colleague and action co-lead, Sivananthi, to come forward and to speak about comprehensive sexuality education. The floor is yours, Siva.
Thank you, Tamil. The first priority of this action coalition is to provide access to comprehensive sexuality education, right? And in line with international technical guidance on CSE, we aim to increase the delivery of comprehensive sexuality education to reach 50 million more children, adolescents, and youth by 2026, both in school and out of school. In this action coalition, we work to increase knowledge, awareness, and empowerment of diverse children, adolescents, and youth, including young persons with disabilities, adolescents in unions, and gender non-conforming and LGBTQI young people, through implementation of CSE in formal and non-formal settings. CSE should explicitly change gender norms in order to advance gender equality and human rights, as research indicates that sexuality education that explicitly addresses gender power imbalances is 5 times more likely to reduce STIs and unintended pregnancies than education that ignores gendered power dynamics. Comprehensive sexuality education delivered in formal or non-formal settings makes a significant contribution to the elimination of gender-based violence and harmful practices, including child, early, and forced marriages and unions, and genital mutilation and cutting, including FGMC and child sexual abuse. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, school closures and economic precariousness makes girls more vulnerable to sexual abuse and early forced unions and marriages, and results in increased numbers of adolescent pregnancies and vulnerability to gender-based violence. In this context, ensuring the full implementation and delivery of CSE will become the game changer to halt the regression in gender equality standards that have been noted due to the effects of the pandemic. How will we achieve this? We hope to do this through 4 key tactics. The first key tactic is to link CSE with SRHR service delivery that is accessible and acceptable to children, adolescents, and youth through friendly services. Focus must be placed on ensuring that CSE linked to SRH services reaches young people who face the greatest barriers. For example, those who live in rural areas, who are from the lowest income quintiles, young persons with disabilities, and young people living with HIV and are gender non-conforming and LGBTQI in formal and non-formal settings. The second tactic is through laws and policies, and to strengthen legal and policy frameworks by making CSE part of the national curricula and by ensuring adolescents have equal access to education, free from limitations related to childbearing States really coverage and or capacity building, where we need to strengthen human and financial resources financing.
Thank you very much, Siva, for sharing the importance of financing, changing laws and policies, and also norms change. And importantly, as a fourth area of action, linking comprehensive sexuality education to accessible and acceptable, that is youth-friendly SRHR services. Now, to give us an example of this kind of inspirational work, we would like to invite Riju Dakal, who is the president of UWA of Nepal, to share with us why she does the work that she does to promote comprehensive sexuality education and what are the lessons that she's learned along the way. Please, Riju, the floor is yours.
Hi. Am I audible?
You are indeed.
Yes. So, thank you for having me. I was 11. I remember when I had gone to a nearby grocery shop to fetch something, and the shopkeeper had inappropriately touched me. But I was 15 when I realized that the touch was inappropriate, and it had been too late to fight. I was yet not sure whether I should have taken some action, even when I was 15. And when I was 18, it finally caught me that that should be discussed. It should be loud, and I should fight my battles. When I had finally understood the concepts of consent, coercion, and harassment, I wish I was introduced to these important lessons earlier in my life. I am 22 now, finally fighting, because now I'm informed and realize the needs of different concepts related to comprehensive sexuality education. And when I still hear stories of abuse and harassment and violence, it takes me back to my days when I used to acknowledge people's comments that one should dress appropriately to avoid such accidents, to my education and grooming, where topics of sexuality education were a matter of shy to discuss. And I feel how it feels to lack confidence just because you're not informed. I am an SRHR activist in Nepal and have been advocating to address the current gaps in comprehensive sexuality education, CSE, for all young people in their diversity. Comprehensive sexuality education is a curriculum-based process of teaching and learning about the cognitive, emotional, physical, and social aspects of sexuality. It equips children, young people, and adolescents with knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values that will empower them with informed decision-making, realization of their health and well-being, and protection of their rights. CSE has personally been an instrument to my well-being, where I can proudly defy the age-long taboos and stigmas and defend my choices on my body, my sexual and reproductive health. As an activist of CSE, not only do I feel powerful for myself, but for all young people who can now bring these discussions on table and can voice forth their needs of accurate, age-appropriate, and authorized channels of sexuality education. Nepal, in particular, has quite progressive curriculum, but there are inadequacies as the curriculum is not comprehensive and age-appropriate, and also has several structural and implementation challenges that stem down to societal constructs, taboos, and stigmas. My own experience has taught me how important CSE is, especially for young people, both in and out of school. And thus, it is very relevant to advocate for comprehensive sexuality education for all young people in their diversity. Most parts of the curriculum in Nepal surround aspects of reproductive health and is a mandatory subject in schools. But the teachers are often lacking the capacity to deliver life skill-based SRHR information. And some schools still argue about the implications of sex education. The out-of-school children are usually more vulnerable to early marriages, adolescent births, unwanted pregnancies, and limited access to sexual and reproductive health services that lead to life-threatening conditions. In such context, it is important that we young people realize the significance of CSE and trigger the realization among others as well. It gives me immense pleasure to represent a youth organization, YUA, working for comprehensive sexuality education in Nepal for the past few years. And I'm thrilled to know more about the tactics of CSE in the Action Coalition as well. This will definitely add to the momentum of movement for a safe, secure, and free society where young people in all their diversity can enjoy their sexual and reproductive health and rights free from coercion, violence, and discrimination. Thank you.
Thank you, Riju. And now we have a poll that is taking place, and we ask the audience to input their answers onto the screens. And our important question is, for expanding comprehensive sexuality education, which are the tactics that are most important, right? And we have 4 choices. There's improving quality of CSE in and out of school, laws and policies that make CSE mandatory, norm change to support CSE, and linking CSE with services that are accessible and acceptable to young people. So make your choices. So that's great. We have actually almost equitably distributed, but our leaders are improving the quality of CSE and linking with CSE with services that are accessible and acceptable to young people. But both law, norm change as well as law and policies to make CSE mandatory coming a very close third, 23%. Okay, and for our next speaker, I would like to invite Shannon Kowalski, the Director of Policy and Advocacy from the International Women's Health Coalition. And the question to you is, the second action is comprehensive abortion and contraception services, and how will this be achieved, Shannon?
Thank you so much, Siva. It's such an honor to be here tonight with my co-collaborators on this Action Coalition. So in order to improve access to contraceptives and abortion services as part of a comprehensive package of sexual and reproductive health care, we have settled on 3 tactics: improving the delivery of services, changing laws, policies, and guidelines to expand access, and financing. So there's been already significant work to expand access to contraceptives. We are planning to build on this work by tackling some of the most intractable barriers to uptake and use, increasing the focus on quality of care, and supporting individuals' autonomy and range of choices. But I'm particularly excited that this multi-stakeholder initiative has taken on addressing access to abortion in such a comprehensive and rights-based way. In the area of service delivery, we'll be working towards primary healthcare services and universal health coverage that includes comprehensive contraception, abortion, and post-abortion care as part of a full package of sexual and reproductive health services. We will also work towards the scale up of community-delivered commodities and improving the quality of care. In the area of law and policy, we'll be working to move regulatory and policy barriers to access, expand legal abortion, and decriminalize abortion everywhere. In the area of financing, we'll be working to increase both the amount and quality of domestic resources and external financing for sexual and reproductive health services, improve commodity choice, and remove financial barriers, including through mechanisms such as strategic purchasing and market shaping initiatives. And across all areas, we'll prioritize intersectionality and ensure that women, girls, and gender diverse people from marginalized and excluded communities who often experience stigma and discrimination in sexual and reproductive health care are at the center of our work. These tactics both reinforce and complement each other. When taken together, they can improve the quality of sexual and reproductive health care that people receive, increase accessibility and the availability of care by reducing barriers, and increase its acceptability by being more responsive to individuals' needs. I want to give an example of one thread that runs through the three tactics in this action area, which is facilitating self-care for sexual and reproductive health. The evidence is clear. Women and girls can safely and effectively manage their use of contraceptives, including pills, injectables, and emergency contraception, as well as abortion using medication, provided they have accurate information and a backup source of medical care if they need it. They can also effectively use diagnostic tests for sexually transmitted infections, just as they can effectively use tests to determine whether or not they are pregnant. Yet in almost all countries of the world, sexual and reproductive health care is over-medicalized and over-regulated, with both legal and policy barriers put in place that reduce people's ability to access comprehensive sexual and reproductive health care, both within the formal health sector and outside of it. These are the types of barriers to care that this Action Coalition is trying to address. The benefits of investing in self-care are many. When it comes to service delivery, for example, it can help increase coverage and access, reduce health disparities, and increase equity, as well as improve the quality of care. In the area of financing, it can reduce costs for both the individual and the health system, and increase efficiency in the allocation and use of scarce health resources. And because people are able to access the care they need in the way that they want it, it improves health outcomes and contributes to the realization of human rights and social justice. The tactics in this area, supporting self-care through service delivery interventions, establishing enabling laws and policies, and financing that improves the availability of sexual and reproductive health commodities, have exciting potential to give people the power to exercise autonomy over their own lives, reduce the cost of care, and improve their own health. For adolescents who find it easier to get contraceptives over the counter than through a health clinic, it can give them the tools to prevent unintended pregnancies and have greater control over their own lives without having to deal with stigma from healthcare providers. For someone who needs an abortion but has no easy access to a health clinic, getting pills by mail or at the local drugstore could be a lifesaver. We know that access to contraceptives and abortion positively impact women's expectations for their future and their overall sense of empowerment. These basic things give women, girls, and gender diverse people around the world the tools that they need to be able to achieve their aspirations. It's fundamental for gender equality. For women, girls, and gender diverse people, these actions will be revolutionary. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. That was such an excellent response. And now I would like to actually introduce Cynthia Adanz, who is the CEO of Integrated Health Organization, and she's also a She Decides 25 at 25 Generation Equality leader. The most important thing is we want to find out from you, Cynthia, what motivates your work and how would you like to share from your experiences with others if they want to make commitments towards advancing this action?
Thank you very much. I do what I do because as a young Cameroonian and health personnel, I have seen firsthand the way females are shamed when they try to access a contraceptive. I have been a victim of bullying when I try to purchase an off-the-counter contraceptive like a condom. I was bullied severely, so I know how that feels. The attempt promiscuous, if properly brought up, shameless, and in worst scenarios, bullied like me. This has led to the undeniable high rate of illegal abortions and teenage pregnancies in Cameroon. Religion and societal norms have pushed many females into unwanted silence, unwanted pregnancies, and death in worst cases trying to perform an unsafe abortion, because abortion is illegal in Cameroon. In order to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal Agenda 3.11, 3.71, 3.72, and 5.6, which are all focused on reducing maternal mortality ratio to meet the family planning needs of women and to ensure universal access to sexual and reproductive health and rights, women must have the freedom and right, void of social tags, to access contraceptive services and information, as well as free and safe abortion services. In this light, together with my team, we currently launched a sensitization campaign as a She Decides 25 by 25 youth leader in secondary schools in a town called Boya in the southwest region of Cameroon, where we actually use question boxes, and these teens are allowed to drop questions regarding their sexual and reproductive health in need with nicknames. Now, why do we use nicknames? We choose nicknames because we know at the start, we understand the society in which we find ourselves. And so we are therefore trying to slowly build up their confidence. We are doing this to help the young people understand their sexual and also their reproductive health and rights. We later on pick up these questions and provide timely responses and counseling, both offline and online, to those that permit us to have their contacts, definitely. We are confident in the long run that this initiative will extend to more schools, and also these teens will develop the self-confidence and voice the need to fight for their own sexual and reproductive health and rights without fear of social stigma. We have also in the past carried out many workshops, seminars, and pep talk about ensuring the sexual and reproductive health and rights of women in church, university campus, radio and television programs. It hasn't been an easy process, owing to how delicate such a topic is in the society from which I come from. But visible progress has been made as more churches especially now open their doors for us to give such talks. I am therefore committed to increasing availability, accessibility, acceptability, and the quality of comprehensive abortion and contraceptive services in Cameroon. Women need to decide for themselves without a question. That is my definition of bodily autonomy and my belief for a new normal. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cynthia, for bringing all of the different, issues that we work on to actually talk about the indivisibility of the different actions that we are articulating, and how if we need to make improvements, we need to actually address all of it. And now that takes us to a very important poll. The next poll is around the question of which tactics will be most important to improve accessibility and quality of SRHR services. Would it be advancing SRH self-care solutions, increasing financing for contraception and abortion services, improving commodity security and choices in types of birth control and medical abortion? And the last is, of course, removing policy and legal barriers to safe legal abortion. Please vote and let us know what you think. Great. And we have removing policy and legal barriers to safe abortion as being like the #1 choice. Indeed, this is an agenda that has been lagging behind since the time of Cairo and Beijing. And we have coming in a close second is improving commodity security and choices in types of birth control and medical abortion, and increasing financing for contraception and abortion coming in a third, with advancing SRHR self-care solutions at 13%. Thank you everyone for sharing your thoughts and your with us. And now we're going to have a little movement break to ensure that we kind of re-energize ourselves. And I'd like to introduce Annalijn, who is the Assistant Professor of the University of British Columbia, to take us through this movement break. Bring it on, Annalijn.
Okay, is everyone able to hear me okay? I think so. Yes. Okay.
We hear you great, Annalijn.
Okay, thank you. So I just want to acknowledge that I'm on the traditional unceded ancestral territory of Musqueam. I'm Annalijn. I'm going to share some Indigenous Filipino martial arts with you to get you moving. So try to stand up if you can and just give yourself a bit of space, just a little bit around your body. And we're going to start by going to the right side with our foot on an angle in the left, and then go to the right, and then go to the left. We're just making a little kind of diagonal position off of our center. And now if you can, get yourself a pen or just use your finger, and we're going to make an X in the air. And when we do this with our feet moving at the same time, we're challenging our brain to kind of do something different with our hands and our feet side. And by crossing your body from left side to right side, it activates the neuromuscular connections. It helps build new connections in the brain. And they found that this kind of movement in the neuroscience literature helps with developing your prefrontal cortex, which is good for memory and executive function. So we're going to go back to our right hand. We're going to do this off to the side, but we're going to bring our foot up, go over, and then back into our triangle. So it's sort of an upside down triangle. And we go across and just make the X however you want. It might feel a little bit awkward. That's a good thing. It makes you know that you're kind of having a brain scramble and that new connections are being formed. So switch your hand, but keep moving in the same direction. You're just going to use your left hand, and we're going to then switch directions. So now we're back in the middle. I'm going to go left side and make my triangle to the left side. And I'm still doing my left hand. I'm just making X's in the air. This is called ECMIA in the Filipino martial arts that I'm drawing on for this knowledge for our fitness. So now switch your hands, but keep the same direction. So you've got your right hand, and if you raise your legs up high, that gives you extra fitness. If you can't do with your stability, just make the triangle. You don't have to move your feet. I'm just raising it to give myself a little extra boost there. And we're just going to go backwards and make a backwards triangle. So we're going to go backwards with our X. I'm not going to, just doing a diagonal right now before we do our triangles. And back. And now switch hands. So you might find that one side feels more comfortable than the other, probably your dominant hand, but it's really good to challenge and balance the body, do left and right. So now let's do a triangle. Back to right hand, go back at the bottom, across the base, up and forward. So back, across, and up to the middle. Back, across, up to the middle. And keep trying to do your X with your hand, and again, and up and back and across and to the middle. Left hand, same direction. I'm going back, right, left across, in the middle. Back, right, left across, in the middle. But my left hand is making the X. Up in the middle, back, cross, in the middle. So we're making a triangle on the ground, and we're making an X in the air. And you might find you have to look at your feet. That's okay. I'm used to doing this. Okay. Now we're going to switch directions. So we're going to go back left, but with my right hand across the middle, up into the middle. So back left, across to the right, and back to the middle. Back left, across, and up to the middle. Back, and cross, and up to the middle. Switch hands, but keep the same direction with your feet. A couple of more, and then we'll kind of cool down as I come to the end with time. Okay, one more time, and just put the pen down. We're just going to cool ourselves down by just going back into that kind of diagonal pattern with the feet. And just keep your hands by their side, and just slowly let your breath come back to where it's a little bit more normal. And we can step back and back and step back and back, and then come forward and back and forward. Okay, so hopefully you had a little bit of excitement in the brain and the body. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Annalijn.
Thank you, Annalijn. And now we welcome everyone back, and I will again, remind that the panelists should turn on their video and their audio when they're speaking, and switch it on when they're not speaking. And we have now with us our next interventionist is also another person heading a youth-led organization, which is Eunice Garcia, who's the Executive Director of the Youth Coalition for Sexual and Reproductive Rights. Eunice, the question to you is that the third action is about empowering girls and women in all of our diversity to make autonomous decisions about our bodies, sexuality and reproduction, including decisions about genital cutting and entering into marriages or unions. How will this be achieved?
Thank you very much. Yo voy a hacer mi intervención en español y bueno, uno de los pilares fundamentales de las acciones y las áreas prioritarias que hemos identificado, por supuesto, ha sido sobre la autonomía corporal y la toma de decisión, el poder de toma de decisión que tienen las mujeres, las niñas y las adolescentes alrededor del mundo. Lo que hemos platicado, lo que hemos trabajado dentro de la coalición de acción es que es indispensable tomar acciones para poder cambiar las normas, para poder incrementar la autonomía corporal de las mujeres, para poder cambiar la forma en que la sociedad interpreta y trata a las mujeres y a su independencia y a su autonomía. Queremos promover la agencia de las mujeres. Queremos que todas las mujeres en todas sus diversidades, bajo un concepto de interseccionalidad entendido no nada más como diversidad e inclusión, sino entendido como el estudio de los sistemas de opresión que existen. Queremos atacar esos sistemas de opresión a través del concepto de interseccionalidad para que todas las mujeres en todas sus diversidades puedan tomar decisiones por ellas mismas, para que puedan tener el derecho de que se respete que no es no y que sí es sí, y que puedan tomar decisiones sobre su cuerpo, sobre sus vidas y sobre sus derechos sexuales y reproductivos. Dentro de las tácticas que hemos platicado dentro de la coalición de acción, hemos priorizado el cambio de normas sociales, actitudinales. Estamos intentando con estas acciones cambiar la forma en la que la sociedad patriarcal ejerce control sobre los cuerpos de las mujeres y sobre sus decisiones. Y para esto también otra de las tácticas que hemos priorizado es, por supuesto, priorizar el cambio en leyes y en políticas públicas. Nos parece muy importante también mencionar que dentro de este foro de generación e igualdad, el empoderamiento de las juventudes ha sido clave para poder llegar también a estas acciones y a estas áreas prioritarias. Definitivamente la participación de jóvenes en estos espacios ha traído una visión diferente de lo que significa la autonomía corporal y la toma de decisiones, sobre todo en cuanto a las prioridades de los jóvenes. Y para esto también se nos hace muy importante mencionar que, bueno, dentro del movimiento de jóvenes que conformamos los cuerpos de líderes jóvenes del Foro de Generación de Igualdad, esta ha sido una de las discusiones recurrentes que hemos tenido, ¿no? O sea, no nada más el empoderamiento dentro de las acciones en concreto, sino el empoderamiento de las niñas, de las jóvenes y de las adolescentes en el proceso del Foro de Generación e Igualdad. Y me parece fundamental mencionar que se ha hecho un trabajo súper bonito dentro de estos grupos para poder poner un documento con recomendaciones concretas sobre cómo poder hacer que la participación de los jóvenes dentro de este proceso sea realmente significativa y sea realmente una forma de liderazgo y no únicamente una forma de participación. Y para esto me refiero al documento que hemos puesto juntos sobre el manifiesto de jóvenes feministas, donde hemos realizado una serie de recomendaciones para mejorar el proceso, porque nos parece que si vamos a hablar de autonomía corporal y si vamos a hablar de nuestros derechos dentro de estas coaliciones de acción, nosotros estamos aquí para impulsar las políticas que sean centradas en jóvenes y que es algo muy valioso de todo este proceso, ¿no? Que dentro del Foro de Generación e Igualdad, todos los participantes y todos los colíderes y todos los socios de este proyecto han puesto a las juventudes en el centro. A nosotros nos parece muy importante, también como lo mencionó mi compañera Adriana, los conceptos de no dejar a nadie atrás, el concepto de interseccionalidad que hemos hecho mucho énfasis dentro del movimiento de jóvenes. Me parece que la nueva ola de jóvenes activistas que estamos en estos espacios han hecho demasiado hincapié en el uso correcto de las terminologías, en el uso correcto de los conceptos como es el de interseccionalidad que ya les comentaba. Y pues dentro del trabajo que hemos venido realizando, nos ha parecido muy importante abordar el tema de la autonomía corporal desde estas intersecciones que existen, porque sabemos que autonomía corporal significa algo diferente para todas las personas. Las juventudes somos diversas, el grupo de juventudes no somos homogéneos, y hay una diversidad muy importante que atender, no nada más en cuestiones culturales, en cuestiones regionales, en cuestiones de identidad, y por eso es que esta acción en específico es muy relevante, porque el poder decidir sobre tu cuerpo, el poder decidir sobre tu vida es fundamental para alcanzar la equidad de género. Entonces, esta acción, por supuesto que también se ha trabajado desde un enfoque interseccional. Nos parece que todavía existen algunas technicalidades que se podrían mejorar incluso, y que por eso estamos muy contentas y estamos muy agradecidas por todo el empuje que ha tenido la agenda de jóvenes para lograr que dentro del tiempo que tenemos entre el Foro de Ciudad de México y el Foro de París podamos todavía incorporar las voces de diferentes juventudes, porque nos parece muy relevante poder traer a más diversidades a esta mesa y a esta discusión, porque lo que significa para mí autonomía corporal como mujer mexicana activista, feminista joven, como mujer racializada, no es lo mismo que una persona tal vez en situación de discapacidad que vive en Asia, que tiene otras complejidades, vive. Entonces, para nosotros es muy importante poder atender a todas y cada una de estas realidades, más allá de los marcos teóricos, sino trabajar realmente dentro de las realidades, reconocer a los grupos que han sido excluidos de estas conversaciones durante mucho tiempo, como lo son las mujeres negras, las mujeres afrodescendientes, las mujeres indígenas, las mujeres con discapacidad, las mujeres que viven empobrecidas y sobre todo las niñas y las adolescentes. Nos parece que eso es fundamental. Especialmente las adolescentes y las niñas traen una agenda tremenda en este foro de Generación Igualdad y nos gustaría que todas esas voces también se recopilaran y también se utilizaran para poder encuadrar estas acciones, porque para lo que nosotros tal vez sea muy necesario en leyes y en políticas y en la táctica de normas también, de normas sociales, las niñas y las adolescentes lo viven en unas realidades completamente diferentes y de eso nos hemos dado cuenta, no nada más desde el trabajo que realizamos en la Coalición de Jóvenes por los Derechos Sexuales y Reproductivos, sino también en todas las conversaciones informales que hemos tenido paralelas a este foro, en la preparación de este foro, y es increíble ver toda la energía que traen las generaciones todavía más jóvenes que las nuestras, que estamos aquí sentadas, y nos parece que por eso ha sido muy, muy relevante el tema de autonomía corporal y de empoderar a las niñas y a las mujeres para tomar sus decisiones. Y esto es increíble porque no nada más se trata de empoderarlas, como ya lo había mencionado, para tomar decisiones sobre sus derechos sexuales y reproductivos, sino también para poder sentarse en estos espacios de toma de decisión tan importantes y tan visibles para que puedan expresar sus necesidades concretas y que se atiendan a sus realidades. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Eunice, for taking us through, how important intersectional approaches and intersectionality is into actually realizing bodily autonomy and, decision-making around sexual and reproductive health and rights. I would like to then call upon our next person to make an intervention, who is Diana Moreka, who is the Senior Project Manager for SRHR, the Trust for Indigenous Culture and Health. Diana, we just wanted to ask you what inspires you to do what you do, and from all of your work that you've done at ground level, what are the recommendations you have towards those who are hoping to make commitments to advance this action, Diana?
Thank you very much. So again, my name is Diana Moreka, and I work with an organization known as TICAH based in Nairobi, Kenya. So our work on SRHR seeks to advocate and increase women and girls' access to information and quality services. What you've seen is that existing evidence indicates that there is limited access to accurate and reliable information on sexual reproductive health among Kenyan women and girls that can really empower them to make informed decisions and choices. This is further compounded by barriers to access reproductive health services. Limited access to information, safe SRHR commodities and services do contribute to unwanted pregnancies, teenage pregnancies, unsafe abortion, sexual violence, early marriages, school dropouts, and sometimes death as a result of unsafe reproductive health choices. Policy environment, unfortunately, does not favor full access to safe and timely SRHR information and services. Also, existing policies are not fully implemented, and in some instances, not implemented at all. Sadly, this is the situation in many sub-Saharan countries where TICAH works. So to address the challenges that I've just mentioned, TICAH creates safe spaces where we reach women and girls with comprehensive sexuality education in schools and SRHR information and referrals at the community level. We do run a toll-free hotline known as Anti-Jane Hotline that provides confidential and non-judgmental SRHR information and linkages to services. Additionally, we advocate with policymakers and our governments to enact and implement policies on SRHR. Key among them is comprehensive sexuality education and safe abortion. Lastly, TICAH, in collaboration with Women Help Women and GWINE, based in Nigeria, we do coordinate a network known as Mobilizing Activists around medical abortion. So MAMA represents a regional movement of activists working to advocate for expansion of access to safe abortion, generate shared evidence-based stigma-free information about self-managed abortion and sexual reproductive health and rights directly with women at the community level. MAMA has a membership of about 32 organizations across 25 countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Some of the key lessons learned as MAMA and TICAH are also recommendations I would really like to push in this forum. One of the key lessons learned and also a recommendation is that women and girls have the capacity to make informed decisions about their bodies and sexual reproductive health and rights when armed with factual information. We've seen this when we provide information through our hotline in TICAH and across the MAMA organizations in the sub-Saharan countries that I've talked about, and also comprehensive sexuality education and community sessions on SRHR. We've seen that when we provide information, then women are capable and have the capacity to make informed decisions, including seeking services. So therefore, access to comprehensive sexuality education and SRHR information and quality services is key to advancing women and girls' sexual reproductive health and rights. Another lessons that we've learned is that grassroots feminist activists organizations do play a very key role in advancing women and girls' SRHR needs at the community level. We've seen MAMA organizations across sub-Saharan Africa continue to reach thousands of women and girls annually with the much needed information on sexual reproductive health and self-managed abortion, and also to advocate for safe abortion in their countries. Another recommendation is engagement of regional movements. And what we've seen is that regional movements such as MAMA provides a platform for organizations to advocate jointly at the regional level, share best practices, and ensure design and implementation of effective SRHR advocacy strategies at the country level. Another recommendation is around generation of evidence, which is crucial in development of sound SRHR advocacy strategies and interventions. We as MAMA continue to conduct research on self-managed abortion and use evidence for advocacy. We have found this approach effective in gaining buy-in from key stakeholders in the field of SRHR. Stigma is a major barrier to accessing safe abortion, and we have found that really normalizing conversations on abortion is key to addressing abortion stigma. So we continue having these conversations at the community level and also interventions through social media. The other bit is around restrictive laws on SRHR, and case in point is restrictive laws on safe abortion and criminalization, which are really barriers to access to safe abortion. What we've seen that even in where the law allows for abortion in certain circumstances, some women are unaware of these circumstances or experience barriers to access. We continue to educate women about their rights to access abortion by providing information to self-managed abortion, advocate for decriminalization of abortion, and implementations of laws and policies on SRHR and abortion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Diana. I think you made such a rich intervention with so many points, but my key takeaway is that some of these the issues that we're talking about, we really need grassroots and feminist organizations who have always been standing up for these issues to be supported throughout this process. And now we go to another interesting poll. So we hope that all of the people in the room will participate. And the poll is around the question of increasing SRHR decision-making in bodily autonomy. Which are the tactics that will be the most important? Whether it's community-based and group education, engaging stakeholders and allies of all genders, creating mass and social media campaigns, and legal and policy change. So do give us your input on what you think is going to be the most important tactics on taking this forward. Okay, so excellent. So with the number one, we have community and based and group education, which is seen as the most important tactic for increasing SRHR decision-making and bodily autonomy, followed by engaging stakeholders and allies of all genders, as well as ensuring legal and policy change. And then we have mass and social media campaigns coming at 14%. Okay, thank you, everyone. And now we will have Professor Charlemagne Marie Ragnag-Néwendé, who's the Minister of Health from Burkina Faso, who will share with us on the actions number 4, which is strengthening civil society and how it will be achieved. And can we have the video?
Mesdames et messieurs, l'année 2020 marque le 25e anniversaire de la conférence de Beijing, Pékin plus 25, qui reste la plus progressiste au monde en matière d'autonomie de la femme, en particulier sur ses droits en santé sexuelle et de la reproduction. Le Burkina Faso a souscrit à la déclaration de Beijing et à son plan d'action. Ainsi, avec son plan national pour le développement économique et social, il a entrepris d'énormes efforts et actions au plan politique, législatif et programmatique pour renforcer les droits en santé sexuelle et de la reproduction des femmes et des filles. Par ailleurs, notre pays s'est résolument engagé à réduire au maximum les conséquences des naissances non planifiées en ratifiant des déclarations, les pactes et plusieurs conventions internationales et régionales sur les droits des femmes et des filles en santé de la reproduction et en mettant des stratégies à haut impact pour la promotion de ces droits au Burkina Faso. Pour réaliser le défi de l'accélération de la transition démographique selon la vision du président du Faso, son Excellence M. Roch-Marc Christian Kaboré, le Burkina Faso s'est illustré dans l'implémentation de stratégies à haut impact en matière de droits sexuels et de la reproduction, et en particulier dans le domaine de la planification familiale, toute chose qui a valu la reconnaissance et la célébration de son leadership, voire mondial, en 2018 à Kigali, au Rwanda. Mesdames et messieurs, tout cela traduit l'engagement politique des plus hautes autorités de notre pays à faire des droits en santé sexuelle et de la reproduction des femmes et des filles une réalité quotidienne. En outre, lors du sommet de Nairobi en novembre 2020 sur la CIPD plus 25, autour du thème « Accélérer les promesses », le Burkina Faso a pris de nouveaux engagements pour la réalisation optimale des décisions de la CIPD au Caire en 1994, auquel il a adhéré. Mieux, l'adoption par le gouvernement de la politique de gratuité des soins et services de la planification familiale, la révision du code pénal, la révision de la loi portant code de la santé publique au Burkina Faso et la révision des documents, des politiques, normes et protocoles en santé de la reproduction et planification familiale, l'adoption de l'assurance maladie universelle intégrant les services de planification familiale et la création du secrétariat technique chargé de l'accélération de la transition démographique constituent quelques exemples réussis de la volonté politique des plus hautes autorités. Mesdames et messieurs, la planification familiale figure en bonne place parmi les priorités de développement du Burkina Faso. En témoigne l'organisation de la conférence internationale sur la population et le développement en février 2011, qui a donné naissance au partenariat de Ouagadougou. Véritablement, au cours de la décennie 2011-2020, et malgré les difficultés sanitaires et sécuritaires, le Burkina Faso peut se féliciter d'avoir pris des décisions politiques courageuses et audacieuses pour améliorer l'environnement en faveur de la promotion des droits en santé sexuelle et reproductive. En ce moment, nous avons entamé le processus pour la définition des engagements 2030. Mesdames et messieurs, dans l'optique de poursuivre les efforts entamés en faveur des droits en santé sexuelle et de la reproduction des femmes et des filles, l'État burkinabé s'est positionné pour piloter la coalition DSSR entrant dans le processus de Pékin plus 25 au regard de sa grande expérience pouvant servir d'école pour plusieurs pays du monde. Le Burkina Faso est le seul pays de l'Afrique de l'Ouest francophone aux côtés d'autres grandes puissances et cela constitue une très grande opportunité pour mieux renforcer les interventions en matière de DSSR et de planification familiale. Je saisis cette occasion pour témoigner la reconnaissance de l'État burkinabé à l'ONU Femmes et à tous les membres de la coalition pour avoir reçu favorablement la candidature du Burkina Faso. Mesdames et messieurs, les travaux de la coalition DSSR auxquels le Burkina Faso et l'ONG Équilibre et Population, membres du réseau Alliance Droit et Santé, ont activement participé, ont permis de construire les grands axes du plan d'action de la coalition qui sont les nôtres, à savoir développer l'éducation à la vie familiale et à la parenté responsable, accroître la disponibilité, l'accessibilité, l'acceptabilité et la qualité des services complets de santé de la reproduction et augmenter l'accès au processus décisionnel de santé sexuelle et reproductive. Conscient des enjeux qui se présentent aux femmes et aux jeunes filles du pays, l'État s'engage davantage à promouvoir l'éducation à la vie familiale au Burkina Faso, à renforcer l'offre des services de santé de la reproduction pour les adolescents et jeunes, à améliorer les conditions d'accès aux services de santé sexuelle et reproductive selon la loi, et enfin, améliorer la collaboration entre le secteur privé de la santé avec l'État pour une meilleure promotion de la gratuité de la planification familiale. Mesdames et messieurs, en définitive, et pour terminer mon propos, je dirais que le Burkina Faso, pour répondre à la politique gouvernementale d'accélération de la transition démographique, a fait et fera davantage des droits sexuels et de la reproduction une priorité au cœur de ses actions pour une capture rapide du dividende démographique. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Professor Charlemagne. It is interesting to hear how Burkina Faso is developing commitments aligned with the actions of the Action Coalition. For example, improving SRHR education and access to services for young people, as well as working with the private sector to improve financial accessibility for all people. One comment of note by the minister is how closely the government is working with civil society as leaders of this action coalition and more broadly to make progress on SRHR. The collaboration with civil society underlines the importance of Action 4, which is to strengthen accountability to, participation of, and financing of girls, women's, and feminist organizations and networks. I am delighted to invite Marisa Viana to speak about the importance of network and movement building and lessons that she has learned. Marisa is a native of the Brazilian Amazon and is currently the executive coordinator of Realizing Sexual and Reproductive Justice Alliance, also known as RESURGE. She has led young feminist organizing at the global, regional, and national levels and has worked with various feminist organizations to advance sexual and reproductive rights and bodily autonomy. Marisa, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Good morning. Can you hear me? Okay, hi. Thank you so much, Siva, and thank you for the invitation to be here tonight. I want to start by acknowledging and honor the millions of lives lost to COVID-19 and to acknowledge what a privilege it is to be sharing this space with all of you tonight or this morning. Research works towards building a world where sexual and reproductive justice is a reality for women, adolescents, and young people in all of our diversity, and where we can enjoy pleasure, bodily autonomy, integrity, and freedoms. Core to our work and my own personal commitment is to center pleasure in any organizing efforts around bodily autonomy and sexual and reproductive health and rights. While the attention on health outcomes and disease prevention is of utmost importance in particular in the context we are currently living, the tools, information, and resources to live a full, safe, pleasure-centered life critical to bodily autonomy continues to be underfunded and stigmatized. In research, we do the work we do as a way to resist protectionist, criminalizing, and paternalistic approaches to the ways violations of sexual and reproductive health and rights are addressed and how these rights are upheld, particularly in the cases of adolescents and young people, LGBTIQ folks, Indigenous women and girls, those with disabilities, sex workers, migrants, refugees, and low income, and those living in poverty, among others whose rights are constantly being violated and dismissed in many cases under the guise of protection. For too many of us, our body is still not fully ours. Making connections across different identities, realities, contexts, and inequalities we face due to the multiple forms of oppression and discrimination is a way to build a more comprehensive response to address our sexual and reproductive health and rights needs and uphold our human rights. The transnational, cross-regional, and cross-movement work done by research responds to the critical need of making sure that the complexities and nuances of our work and priorities within communities at the local and national levels are not lost when they are raised, discussed, and negotiated in regional and global policy fora, and that our lives, our lived realities, and demands for our own communities are central to all decision-making. We speak out about the imbalance of power in advocacy and policy spaces and aim to create spaces and momentum for solidarity and care for young feminists from various movements and constituencies who are demanding accountability for justice in our communities, on the streets, and on the halls of power throughout the world, and whose work on the ground will be critical to see the visions of the action coalitions realized. There are many lessons learned. First and foremost, this work cannot be done individually and cannot be done in silos. Learning and recognizing the importance of collective cross-regional and cross-movement solidarity, organizing, analysis, and knowledge sharing are critical to strengthen the political participation and the civic engagement of those committed to advance gender justice and sexual and reproductive health and rights. There's a fundamental need to draw the links between neoliberal capitalist patriarchy, economic, racial, and environmental injustices, authoritarianisms, and other systems of oppressions when we are discussing gender justice and bodily autonomy. We must constantly ask the question, how are these structures and manifestations of power hindering the collective goals of building a more just, sustainable, and equitable world? This question is also directly linked to the ways we hold ourselves accountable within our own movements and feminist spaces. How do we reflect on the ways that we may be perpetuating patriarchal norms, exclusion, stereotypes, and honoring, and our pressures in our own ways of working, from funding to organizing to policy advocacy and taking up spaces? This, for example, needs to be reflected in what intergenerational organizing looks like. Acknowledging and honoring that building meaningful intergenerational spaces takes time, energy, and sustained effort in resourcing, and recognizing that organizing across generations is beyond the binaries of being young or old. We must be intentional and we must be purposeful. Which leads me to share my final reflection on what we have learned in working to amplify South feminist actions. The necessity of flexible funding that respect the pace of different forms of organizing and understanding the movement building and strengthening the political participation goes beyond a one-time meeting and capacity building session. There is power in resourcing deep, intentional, slow-paced work that demands transformation and change beyond the status quo. The momentum being built with the action coalitions offers us this opportunity to go far in how we show up for women and girls, in particular, those who have historically been pushed to the margins. Thank you very much, and thank you for all the work with the action coalitions in the launch today.
Thank you so much, Marissa. And we have quite a number of interesting questions that have come up in the chat box, and we have roughly about 10 minutes or so to kind of answer them. So the first question on how can we help rape survivors regarding sexual health rights, I thought Tamil, perhaps you could answer that, because this has got to do with the work between two coalitions sometimes, isn't it?
Indeed, it does. Thank you very much, Siva. We are very committed, as in it shows in our vision, to working across all of the action coalitions, and between the Action Coalition leadership with GBV Action Coalition in particular, we've had a meeting together and conversations, and are recognizing very much that there is a need for sexual violence survivors to receive a comprehensive package of SRHR services, and that is part of the international standards of care that should be provided both from the perspective of the United Nations system in the essential package for survivors of violence, and on the other side, also part of the definition of an integrated and comprehensive sexual and reproductive health and rights package that has been adopted by the Action Coalition on Bodily Autonomy and Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights. So it's an excellent question, extremely relevant, and one that both Action Coalitions have taken on board and are looking how we can weave that together to make sure that survivors of sexual assault and sexual violence receive the comprehensive services that they need, including within the health system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tamil. And we have another excellent question, which is about considering the backlash on SRHR issues at all levels. How can we actually address this in our tactics? And I think that this is a question that we can put to Shannon and also perhaps, Diana, because you're also working at the country level in Kenya. So perhaps both of you could look at this question. Who'd like to go first?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, great, Shannon. Thank you.
Sorry, Siva, would you mind just repeating the question quickly?
Yeah. So if it is considering the backlash on SRHR issues at all levels, right? What is the recommendation on how we can address this question of backlash in all of the tactics?
I think that's a really important question because it's something that we are seeing not just around the world, increasing opposition to sexual and reproductive health and rights. And I think a lot of it just comes down to having critical conversations about the realities of people's lives and what it is that they need, but also investing in accessible services, comprehensive sexuality education, and working with communities. I think a lot of the barriers are because people have not had the kind of care and services and information that they need from the beginning. And so working to change those, and then the way that we talk about sex and sexuality is going to be critical to addressing some of that backlash.
Thank you so much, Shannon. And Diana, perhaps you could also share some of the ways in which the backlash can be handled within our tactics.
Yeah, just to add to what Shannon has talked about, yeah, it's very, across the world, we've seen a lot of backlash on SRHR. But one of the key aspects that we've seen works is providing factual information, because what we've seen is, in most cases, what is lacking is people do not have factual information and really realities of what is happening to women and girls. So having those conversations at school levels with key stakeholders at the community level, social media campaigns with governments, so that people at least understand that these are realities and these are facts, and really these conversations need to happen, and interventions to address challenges that women and girls are facing have to be put in place. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Diana. And I think that's the importance of the Generation Equality Forum's coalition, isn't it? Because it brings all the different stakeholders together, both at government level as well as community level, and we are able to together, address this question of backlash and make progress. So we also have a lot of questions actually in the chat box about comprehensive sexuality education and how this should just not be limited to teaching about contraception contraception and access to abortion are just about access to services, right? But it needs to be about relationships and negotiating sexual pleasure and all of those different and really important aspects of intimate life. So for that, maybe we could ask Riju to help us answer that question, as well as Adriana. And also I'm going to invite Marissa to that. Who'd like to go first? Marissa, would you like to go?
Hi, Siva. Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. So the questions in the chat box, there are quite a number of questions about comprehensive sexuality education and how that's about going beyond just providing access to services, right? And it deals about negotiating relationships, consent, as well as sexual pleasure, right? So would you like to say like a little bit more on how, you know, the access to CSC to go into this really bigger dimensions in order to tend to the concept of bodily autonomy?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I can comment, and hopefully Ritu will come in as well. And I think this question is also linked to the anti-rights backlash, because so often the question on comprehensive sexuality education gets stuck on the sex part and forgets all the other components of sexuality education that has to do with addressing gender norms and stereotypes and violence and teaching bodily autonomy and looking at choices. So I think it's also a way, a tactic to really expand in terms of fighting the backlash and breaking up the myths of what sexuality education is. And I also, it's also important aspects of not only within the school, but also in terms of other spaces where young people gather. Young people are gathering, especially in this context that we're living in. How do we talk about sexuality education that is within and out of school spaces as well? And I think the other point that I want to make in relationship to this, it's also linking to gender equality and how so many, you know, I know that there is an increase and there is an ambition to make sure that comprehensive sexuality education will be available in schools as parts of school curriculum. But the reality is that in many of our countries, there is a huge backlash on the discussions and components of gender equality. And in many of our curriculums, not even the components of gender is being included. So how do we think about comprehensive sexuality education also as a critical component of education that pushes critical thinking amongst young people, and that makes them and that provides the tool to make informed decisions that is beyond sexuality as well. So I think it's an important part of not only looking at the different components of sexuality education, but also linked to organizing and reaching young people where they are at.
Thank you so much, Marissa. Riju, would you like to take that question as well, of how, you know, comprehensive sexuality education needs to also have these dimensions of consent, pleasure, and negotiating relationships?
Yes, sure, Siva. Thank you. So comprehensive sexuality education is very important to the overall well-being and health and overall academic achievements of young people. And it is important that we realize that different aspects and components of comprehensive sexuality education, like gender relations, consent, and relationships, gender equality, are important terms that should be discussed in schools and in out-of-school scenarios for young people, because the young people in their diversity should be informed and should have the power to make their own choices upon upon their body. Upon their bodies, because it's important that young people make responsible choices for themselves and avoid negative health consequences and understand how it works for their own bodies as well. And furthermore, CSE is also important for young people to respect other people's right to bodily autonomy and to recognize that all different aspects of relationships, and can be categorized into healthy and unhealthy, and show dignity and respect for themselves and for others as well.
Thank you so much, Riju. And perhaps we can hear from Adriana as well.
Hola, sí, yo creo que es muy importante tener en cuenta este componente intercultural cuando hablamos de educación sexual integral o educación integral en sexualidad, justo porque necesitamos que toda la información que llegue no solo al ámbito formal educativo, sino también al informal, sea pertinente culturalmente. Es decir, que todos los contenidos y la forma en la que vayamos a abordar todo esto tenga este componente intercultural, ¿no? Creo que ya es algo que habían comentado las compañeras anteriores, me parece que Eunice también ya lo comentó, y es que somos diversas, aun cuando somos de pueblos y comunidades indígenas, somos completamente diversas y nuestros contextos son diferentes, al igual que nuestras realidades. Entonces es necesario primero tener en cuenta que los usos y costumbres de los pueblos y comunidades indígenas no justifican la violencia que se ejerce contra nuestros cuerpos y contra nosotras. Entonces, teniendo como este concepto en el centro, poco a poco vamos a ir llegando a los pueblos y comunidades indígenas para compartir toda esta información con pertinencia intercultural, con perspectiva de género y enfoque de derechos humanos. Entonces, creo que también es muy importante que todos estos contenidos puedan ser traducidos a los idiomas indígenas, porque si seguimos como nombrándolos en español o en inglés o en el idioma, digamos, que más se hable en el país, entonces no vamos a realmente llegar a los pueblos y comunidades indígenas, ¿no? Esta información seguirá siendo incluso racista, seguirá siendo colonial, y entonces lo que necesitamos es nosotras apropiarnos de todo ese contenido para que de verdad hagamos un cambio. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Adriana. And very quickly, I just wanted to recount that Tamil has said that, these fantastic graphics that are being generated by Lisa will be available post-Mexico, and to check the Action Coalition section of the website on the Generation Equality Forum. There's also a question about accountability. And for that, I'd like to draw the attention of everyone that please do look at their draft indicators to measure the draft actions which are included in the draft blueprint. So if you have comments and suggestions to share, please do so through the public conversation. And Tamil has also put the link to this within the chat questions. And with that, I would like to actually turn over to Sarah Hendricks.
Thank you so much, Siva, for your wonderful moderation, and to everybody for this really rich and dynamic dialogue. As you can see online, the dialogue is also being captured visually as an expression of the interaction, as well as of the contributions from the many different perspectives today. Now, at this point in our conversation, we would like to turn for a moment to really look at what the next steps are, to realize this bold and transformative vision of sexual and reproductive health and rights, the 4 actions on bodily autonomy and SRHR, on comprehensive sexuality education, on ensuring abortion and contraception services within a holistic SRHR framework, on increasing SRHR decision-making and bodily autonomy, and on strengthening movements, feminist organizations, and networks dedicated to SRHR. All of this will require commitments that are likewise bold, game-changing, transformative, and bring along many stakeholders into the ambition itself. And so as we head towards the launch of the Action Coalition at the Paris Forum, we want to encourage everyone, leaders and future commitment makers alike, to make courageous and groundbreaking commitments and invite other stakeholders to be part of this effort. To kick this off, we'd like to hear now from 2 of the bodily autonomy and SRHR leaders about how they are translating their vision of the bodily autonomy and SRHR blueprint into concrete commitments. And so the first speaker will be the Minister Sapaska from the Ministry of Labor and Social Policy of the Republic of North Macedonia. And we'd like to hear from you, Minister, about why did North Macedonia become a leader in the Action Coalition on Bodily Autonomy and Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights? And why is commitment making so crucial for the success of this Action Coalition?
Dear participants, I'm honored to be part of the Action Coalition for Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights to jointly identify and mobilize all resources to address the priority issues of promoting women's sexual and reproductive rights. The Action Coalition is an excellent opportunity to create new incentive and to define areas for cooperation on challenges in the field of women's sexual and reproductive rights. The concept of the government of the Republic of North Macedonia, one society for all, implies that women and men should have equal rights to human, social, economic, and cultural development, as well as equal participation in civic and political life. This exact concept makes us leaders in the region. Women's health rights, opportunities, and access to health care are in the focus of sexual and reproductive rights. With the latest amendments to the law on termination of pregnancy, a woman has the right to reproductive freedom, to decide for her own body whether, when, and how many children she will give birth to. The healthcare system has a duty to respond appropriately in a quality manner, in accordance with the most up-to-date standards of evidence-based medicine. Therefore, with the introduction of medical abortion, we are keeping pace with European practices and protocols. The preventive programs allow early detection of changes in reproductive organs of women, early diagnosis, and a high percentage of successful treatment. Moreover, this generates savings of serious financial means, since having successfully undergone treatment, women are able to return to the labor market. New therapies for breast cancer have been introduced, and every woman has timely access to them. Furthermore, free orthopedic braces for women that have undergone surgery are also provided. The most advanced technology for early-stage breast cancer screening has been introduced with accurate and precise diagnosis, which is of crucial importance for the further treatment of patients. As regards the field of education, we have prepared a 3-year action plan for piloting comprehensive sex education. Educational models for the implementation, therefore, in the education system have been developed, and curricula for students aged 13 to 15 years have been prepared, in addition to the teacher's handbook for the implementation of the pilot project for comprehensive sex education. The Ministry of Labor and Social Policy is currently working on developing the new strategy for gender equality 2021-2026. The draft version of the new law of gender equality is ready, and as follow-up, we are to open the wide debate in the society with the sole objective of establishing an efficient gender equality system. I would like to highlight that the Republic of North Macedonia shall continue to work on promoting human rights, including sexual and reproductive rights of women, as a prerequisite for a society founded on democratic principles. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister, for these words. And indeed, thank you very much for sharing with us the advancements that are being made in North Macedonia. It is impressive to learn about the recent progress in North Macedonia to guarantee sexual and reproductive health and rights, including by increasing accessibility and acceptability of abortion based on the best evidence, as well as about forthcoming commitments in the area of comprehensive sexuality education and promoting legal change to ensure gender equality. And now to also inspire us as we think about commitment making, I'd like to introduce Dr. Lene Brayboy, the Chief Medical Officer of CLU, our private sector leader who will share her organization's reasons for joining the SRHR Action Coalition and her excitement about advancing the actions and blueprint. Over to you.
Hi, my name is Dr. Lene Brayboy. I'm the Chief Medical Officer at CLU. CLU was founded in 2012 by Ida Tin with a simple mission to improve the lives of people with periods and empower them to have more autonomy over their reproductive health through period tracking. We are located in Berlin, Germany, but our app is available in 190 countries in 15 different languages. We are especially excited and honored to be included in the UN Coalition for Bodily Autonomy and Sexual, Reproductive, and Health Rights. Thank you so much for the invitation and for including us. We are especially interested in helping decrease the digital divide for young women and girls by 2026. We are also very interested in the comprehensive sexual health education that should be increased to 50 million young women and girls by 2026. We thank you again for the opportunity to participate, and we look forward to sharing in better reproductive and sexual health for women and girls in the future.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lene, and very much as well for just sharing the vision that CLU is bringing as a private sector leader to this Action Coalition. I think we've seen from these leaders, both North Macedonia as well as CLU, the ways that the Generation Equality Action Coalition on Bodily Autonomy and SRHR is an extraordinary platform, both in terms of approach, but also in terms of level of ambition. And indeed, what we've heard today is an ambitious agenda, an agenda that will accelerate progress towards a joint transformative feminist vision in this UN decade of action. And when we kicked off today's conversation, we shared the journey of the Action Coalitions. And now we want to focus our attention in on that top right-hand corner that you see in the visual in front of you, which is a magnifying glass, if you will, of where we are at right now. Mexico City, the kickoff of the Action Coalition draft blueprint on bodily autonomy and sexual and reproductive health and rights, but also an invitation for commitment makers to join the Action Coalition and propel it forward, to turbo boost the energy, if you will, of this tremendous acceleration agenda in the UN decade of action. So how will we get there? This journey to war between now and Paris, France on June 30th, which is today, just 3 months away. And so if you turn to the next slide, I think this will start to provide some of the detail. The time is now for more actors to join this critical moment and this critical movement. And so what are the next steps? How can you become involved? Well, you can become involved essentially by making a commitment, by becoming a commitment maker. Becoming a commitment maker is essentially part of engaging in the Action Coalition on bodily autonomy and sexual and reproductive health and rights in a meaningful, tangible, and dynamic way. Commitment makers will make bold and transformative commitments to one or many of the actions you heard discussed today. They will play a catalytic role in supporting the implementation, but also the measurement, the learning, the monitoring of these actions. They will be part of a community of practice who will engage in driving forward this ambition into concrete reality. And they will be part of mobilizing other stakeholders around the vision that you've heard today, becoming part of shaping that vision itself, and also driving forward the localization of the Action Coalition, translating this ambition into concrete actions at local and regional levels. So who can become a commitment maker? Well, as you can see, it's open for everybody. Women's and feminist organizations, youth-led organizations, other civil society actors, as well as private sector companies, philanthropies, international organizations, international financial institutions, governments from the global north and south, all are invited to join, including other institutions such as local governments, media organizations, research institutions and bodies. Each will be invited to make a commitment, to become part of this blueprint and to translate it into action. And there are 4 different types of commitments to consider. A financial commitment to support the realization of an action to really advance results, bodily autonomy, and sexual and reproductive health and rights. An advocacy commitment, which will amplify and mobilize support for transformative change to achieve the goals of the Action Coalition. Or a policy commitment to really show how an action is translated into concrete policy in the context of a government or a company or an organization. Or a programmatic commitment to deliver programs and services or research that take the vision and the blueprint and really focus on propelling that to scale. These commitments should be game-changing, measurable, and ideally designed with each other, designed as multi-stakeholder commitments. And underpinning these commitments really are the principles of the Action Coalitions, the principles that are so core, not just to what the vision is, but to how we advance it. The principles of intersectionality, as well as of feminist leadership and of transformation. And so all Action Coalition leaders, as well as commitment makers, are encouraged. And I think we can encourage each other to reflect these principles, not only within the design of commitments, but also to bring them home within our own organizations, within our own governments, in our own institutions, companies, in our own individual behaviors and actions. And this is how real transformation will be driven forward. I think we heard Eunice earlier speak about the Young Feminist Manifesto. And it is in that manifesto where this perspective of transformation, this perspective of intersectionality, as well as feminist leadership, so clearly calls for bringing home these commitments in a way that truly transforms our institutions, ourselves, and also the agenda that we've set out. So with this, I would like to just finally emphasize that commitment makers will play such a catalytic role in the success of this Action Coalition on bodily autonomy and sexual and reproductive health and rights. And I'm also delighted to share that the application platform for becoming a commitment maker has been launched on the Generation Equality Forum website, a catalog of commitments to inspire you to think about what kind of commitment could I make, whether I'm a government or a private sector company, a civil society organization, or a philanthropy. There is inspiration for all, and this catalog of commitments will be shared in order to inspire you to design strong commitments, again, ideally in partnership with others. The blueprint that you saw today is indeed a draft, and it will be shaped not only by today's conversation, but also in dialogue as we move forward in these coming weeks and months. We encourage you to provide inputs through the Generation Equality public conversation platform. And so as we head towards Paris, where there will be a spotlight on commitments, we encourage all partners to make bold and groundbreaking commitments, and in doing so, to realize the vision of a world where bodily autonomy and sexual and reproductive health and rights is realized. Thank you, and back over to you, Tamil.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for those inspiring words and for sharing the next steps. I would also like to say muchas gracias a todos los ponentes y a todos los y las participantes en esta sesión tan rica y enriquecedora para el borrador. Thank you all for your participation. Have a wonderful day in Asia Pacific and a wonderful evening here in North America. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.